What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about where do bass go in the spring and the best ways to catch them. Springtime bass fishing, it is an amazing time to be out on the water. The weather has warmed up. You have weather warming trends. You have your lakes, your water levels should be rising to full pool if they have winter drawdowns. You have warmer water temps, and most importantly, you have fish that want to eat. It's all about the spawn. These fish are in that pre-spawn to spawn transition, right? We talked about this just a couple weeks ago on an early spring fishing video. But the spring, we're talking March through May-ish for a lot of the country. That's that pre-spawn and spawn transition time. These fish are coming shallow and they're more susceptible to being caught. We talked about that also. But just flat out, it is nice to be out on the water. It's nice to be outside. We've shaken off some of that ice. We've shaken off some of those colder Arctic freezes, those Arctic blast storms. And now with those water temps moving up, those air temps moving up, those fish are thinking about one thing, and that is the spawn. What do they need? They need to move shallow. They need to eat. They need to get ready to do their thing, right? So as fishermen, it is an amazing time to take advantage of that. So today we're going to talk about kind of where these fish go, how they transition in the different types of fisheries, and then what better way to talk about the best ways to catch them than just pull the rods out of my rod locker. So we'll kind of go through that. We'll kind of go through that mental process, how I break down fisheries, and most importantly, if anything, if you don't take anything else away from this video, move fast, fish fast, find those aggressive fish, because these fish move in waves, and you can fish a ton of dead water because you're either ahead of or behind of those waves of fish moving shallow. So we're going to talk about that. But springtime bass fishing, an amazing time to be out on the water, an amazing time to load the boat, load the kayak. If you're a shore-based angler, it's even better for you because those fish are coming shallow. They're coming to you. So if you have your favorite areas on the lake that you like to walk out to, a main lake point or a secondary point, or heck, the best spot in the very, very back of a cove where a lot of these big boats can't get, those fish are coming to you, and that plays right into your hand, and they're going to be easier for you to reach and easier for you to cast to and catch. So unless you're in the southernmost parts of the country, southern Texas, down in Florida, I talked about it just a little bit ago, but for the most part, the general area, the general main part of the country, we're talking basically March to May is that spawn time. Like I said, down in those southern tips of the country, it starts early, sometimes late December, early January, and then of course up north, it's a few months behind. We're talking May and June and even into July. But wherever you are in the country, you can apply this pre-spawn spawn transition to your fisheries. So we talked about the fish have to come shallow, right? They need to find those spawning bays. They need to find areas that have less contour, less abrupt contour lines. So typically this time of the year, like I said, I'm fishing fast. I'm starting in the biggest bays closest to the dam. Coming off of winter, a lot of these fish have been out deep. The water is less affected by winter storms. The water temperatures don't fluctuate nearly as much as areas of the lake that's closer to creeks and rivers. When you get those cold storms, they typically pump a lot of cold water. So I typically start closest to the dam, maybe the first big spawning bay or flat area closest to the dam, and I'll start in the very back. Now, it doesn't matter if that's a highland reservoir or a lowland reservoir, typically the same. I'm starting there. Now, those of you guys that follow the channel, you know the differences between the two, but those of you guys that maybe are new to the channel, typically a highland reservoir, you have a real short but real tall dam. Basically, they went and they dammed up a river. So you're going to have either a river arm or multiple river arms, a lot more canyon-esque type cuts. You'll have bluff walls, real steep transitions, typically colder, clearer water. You know, springtime, especially early springtime, you get some of those late winter, early spring storms, and main body of the lake could be in the mid to high 50s, but closer to those rivers, you know, it might be down in the mid to high 40s. So you got to kind of pay attention to those water temps. That's why I start closer to the dam, because it doesn't fluctuate as much. But lowland reservoirs have a real wide dam, and they're typically short because they're damming up, basically, in my mind, they're damming up a field or, you know, more of a flat area. So sometimes those dams are extremely long, extremely wide, and maybe there's multiple dams. Typically, those fisheries have a lot less contour. They don't have those long river, multiple long river arms or big bluff walls. A lot of their main bodies have humps and saddles. You might have some creek channels and stuff. But again, I'm starting in the very backs of the closest big bays near the dam because, like I said earlier, that water temp is less affected. I might start in that back of that bay, I might start on a bank that has more sunlight throughout the day, because that side's going to heat up quicker. And yeah, basically I'm following those creek channels in. I'm starting in the back, and then I'm going to work my way out. So that's the lowland reservoirs. Highland reservoirs. Pond fishermen, you guys start at that. You've probably been fishing near your dam all winter long, that deeper water. But now as these fish move towards the flatter area of your pond, maybe your pond is a park or something, and it's just a perfect circle. Maybe that's just coming shallow, so you can hoof it around and fish the whole thing. But if you're on a larger pond where you have a dam and you have maybe a creek or something that's feeding that pond, you can start working your way towards that incoming water. Maybe find a grass line, some laydowns, that sort of stuff. River system guys, you know, the deltas, obviously that's all based on tidal systems and river flows. Tennessee River, you know, your Chickamaugas, your Gunnersvilles, you know, we're well, not Gunnersville, they don't do a drawdown, but Watts Bar, Chickamauga, they do a winter drawdown. So our water levels are starting to rise, and with that rise, those fish are going to be pushing to the back. I talked to you guys about it in that previous video. If you do get a early spring storm and you get some warmer water coming into the back of those creeks, those fish are going to bypass all that stuff and run right to the very back and get in that moving current. But if that's not the case, you're going to continue to work your way in that bay, in that offshoot of the main river current, those backwaters. You're going to start on that first deep water lip, right, that moves into the back of the cut, and then you're going to work your way back. Typically, this time of the year for me, I will actually just run right to the back, figure out if they are back there, and then I will work my way out. But any key piece of cover, whether that's a stump or a laydown, anything visible, whether with my eyes or with, you know, your electronics up front, those fish are going to use those key isolated pieces of cover as transition spots. So no matter where they are in that transition, you know, whether they're closer to the back or farther to the opening, or closer to the opening to the main river or main body, you know, start hitting those key pieces of isolated cover. We're going to talk about baits here in a little bit, but you know, a lot of times this time of the year, the river, the actual main river is colder, so they will get out of that colder water. They'll pop up into the openings of those big backwaters, and then they'll kind of do their migration in steps, in stages. Now, with that said, this time of the year, you know, these fish, there are going to be multiple waves of fish. You know, you might, based on your water temps, based on weather, based on moon phase, you know, you might get a wave that goes early. And then you might, you know, another week or so, they might get get another wave. Some of these fish, once they move up and they start actually spawning, you know, you'll be able to see the beds, you'll be able to see those fish. Some of them, after they spawn, a lot of them will go out and just kind of suspend in deeper water and kind of recover. They're kind of tough to catch for those first few days, but some of them will actually stay shallow, and those are the fish that you're going to continue to catch all summer long on your frogs, your flip and pitch and punch and that sort of stuff. But a lot of these fish, they'll get up, they'll do their thing, and they'll kind of recover for a couple days, and then it's game on. Whether they're moving back out to a little bit deeper water, going to move to those key isolated pieces of cover structure like we talked about, key isolated pieces of cover, and then, like I said, if they stay shallow, we're gonna beat them up with a square bill and a chatterbait, but we're gonna talk about that here in just a little bit. But understand that not all these fish don't move at once. There'll be several different stages through this transition, through these next few months. But again, as far as the fisheries themselves, you know, we talked about a highland reservoir, typically clear water, typically colder, typically steeper banks and bluffs, but those fish have to come shallow. So that's where I'm starting. I'm starting in those backs of those bays, in the very back and on the side of the shoreline, the side of the bay that warms up quicker, that's gonna have your warmest water temps, and then I will work my way out back to those, you know, maybe a little creek channel or back to a secondary point or the next secondary point leading into that spawning bay. You just got to kind of find where your fishery is along that transition. Now, one thing I will say, if I find that I'm catching typically smaller than average fish for my fishery or for that fishery, those are going to be your males. Those are going to be your bucks. Your smaller bass are going to be moving up first. So I will then kind of reverse my pattern or reverse my movement a little bit to get to a secondary point or a step behind where those smaller males are, because that's where those big females are. They typically stage a little bit behind. They don't move with. They're always a little bit behind. And that's how I will target those larger fish in spring, trying to get those big pre-spawn females, because they're coming shallow to get their eggs ready. They're coming shallow to go, you know, move forward with the spawning process, and they feed up, right? So a lot of times in early spring, you will have mega bags. You'll have those pre-spawn females. You'll have those giant bags on your fishery with, you know, big heavy weights. You'll have your new PBs caught. You'll have a lot of those bigger fish. Like I said, they're more susceptible. They're coming to us. We know where they're going, where they have to go. All we have to do is figure out where they are along that process, and then strategically with the right baits and stuff, pick apart those key pieces of isolated cover or structure where these fish are going to use to do that, to go along that process. Now the cool thing is, once they do the spawn, you know, we could talk about bed fishing or whatever. I'm not talking about that in today's video, but after, they're going to use those same stepping stones, those same transition start and stop points in reverse. So if you caught them going in, you can catch a lot of them moving out as well. Now they won't be as heavy because they dumped all their eggs, but that's another great way to target those fish right now. And then, like I said, lowland reservoirs, again, you're not going to have as many secondary points or your long river arms, but you will have those humps and saddles out there on the main body, and you'll have those meandering creek channels with have typically a little bit deeper water, and those are just like highways heading back to those bays. So again, I'm going to start in the very back of that bay. I'm going to work my way out. If they're there, great. I'm gonna blitz them on an A-rig, a glide bait, a chatterbait. I'm moving fast, and if they're not there, then I'm going to work my way out and again find those fish along that process. But I'm going to that first deep water access leading into that bay and see if they're hanging on that transition point, because a lot of times they will stage out there in that deeper water, especially if I am up shallow catching those smaller fish and I want to back out. I'll back out to that first deep area and pick that apart, because a lot of times that's where those big females will hang. Ponds, kind of talked about that briefly. You know, do your thing, pond guys. The fish are coming shallow. You guys are shore-based typically in ponds. There's all different types of ponds. You know, there's the farm ponds, there's the park ponds, there's the golf course ponds. So just remember those fish are going shallow. So wherever that is relative to your pond, that's where those fish are coming. And then natural lakes, typically for the most part, they're semi-featureless. There's not a lot of contour. There's not a lot of things to fish. So if you find a thing, whether it may, whatever it is, isolated rock pile, a lay down, a bush, a tree, a sunk boat, whatever it is that's gonna let those fish kind of sit there and either prep. A lot of times this time of the year, you'll see those fish, even if they're nowhere near the bank, there might be, you know, a quarter mile from shore, but they're only a couple feet down below the surface. You'll see them out there kind of sunning themselves, big old females kind of trying to get ready for that spawn. But if there's a thing that will draw those fish to it for cover, they will be on that. So again, move fast, fish efficiently. You know, one of the mistake that I make all the time is I don't fish fast enough. I like to, my fishing style, I want to understand what I'm fishing. I want to understand, you know, why did I just catch that fish right here, but I didn't catch a fish right back there. I try and overanalyze things sometimes too much. My mistake, especially out here on the Tennessee River, is just not moving fast enough. And I chuck and wind. So when I say move fast, I mean move fairly quickly. Now, with that said, if you start catching fish, then you can slow down and really pick that area apart and then get into that, you know, analyze, you know, why did I catch a fish here? What was it? Oh, there's a stump, or oh, there's a subtle 1 foot transition. These fish are right there on that edge. Those are the things that come into play, at least for me, once I start catching fish and putting that puzzle together. But for the most part, I mean, just fish quickly, fish efficiently, fish fast until you find those fish. Again, they're moving in waves. They don't all move at once, but those fish are on the move. All right, guys, now let's talk about baits, because I've kind of hinted towards some of the baits here in this video a little bit. But if I haven't said it enough, if I haven't beat it into your heads enough, you know, springtime fishing, we're moving quickly. Whether that's finesse fishing or power fishing. So I'm gonna kind of run through the bait. I mean, the rods I literally just pulled out of my rod locker. This is the stuff that I have tied on. Just got back from fishing late last night, but this is what I had tied on. Typically this time of the year, you guys know how much I love throwing an A-rig. Just caught so many giants on it. It's an awesome bait to cover water. It's an awesome bait to catch big fish. I can't tell you how many giants we've caught on this setup right here. Again, this is our A-rig. It's the Tactical Mini Flex 6 wire. So you have 3 dummy wire, 3 longer wires that have that you put your hooks on. Typically this time of the year, I'm going with the Swammer. It's more of an aggressive kick, more of a body roll style swim bait, and that really comes into play in the springtime. As we get those warmer water temps, I like a swim bait that has more roll. You know, all winter long I threw a Kitech. It's more of a subtle kick, but that guy right there, again, I have those Demiki, the Armor Shads as my dummies, teaser baits, and then, like I said, the 3-wire A-rig. That's just something I can chuck and wind. I can fish it fast. I can fish it slow. One tip for you guys, I like to run 3 8-ounce heads. So smaller heads, lighter heads. I can fish an A-rig extremely shallow. You know, less than 2 foot. I can throw that thing up there and get that thing going. A lot of guys don't fish an A-rig that shallow, but that is an awesome, awesome bait. Again, those Demiki Armor Shads, they're super durable. They have a real nice swimming action. So, I mean, those same dummies have been on that rig for 3 or 4 trips out for me. I just change out my actual hooked swim baits. This guy right here. Now, targeting big fish. I talked about that in that previous video. If you guys haven't watched that, go back and watch that one. I just talked about the mindset and how to actually target the bigger fish. You know, those key isolated pieces of cover, whether it's a laydown, whether it's a brush pile, whether it's a dock piling, or a dock that maybe it's just a little bit deeper than the rest of the docks, whatever it may be, wherever I feel like those fish are, a glide bait is another go-to bait, my number 2 bait. This guy right here, this is that Spro Chad Shad. Now in that video I talked about glide baits, how they've come a long way in a short period of time as far as swimming action, as far as quality, as far as fishability. This bait right here is it's a great bait for just chucking and winding. Throw it out there, real twitch. Get that thing, get some directional changes. When you do hit that or come up on that key piece of cover, you know, add that twitch and get that thing going side to side, and 9 times out of 10 that's when you'll get your bite on the glide. Now this is you can see right there I have one of those that's a tungsten little sticky patch by Bait Sanity. I'll link all this stuff down below in the video description. But that actually allows me to fish this thing more aggressively, fish it a little bit quicker, and get real aggressive with it without having this thing coming up and rising and then coming up to the surface and messing up the bait. Another tip for you guys that like to throw glide baits a little bit faster, you don't have to upsize your actual hook size of your hooks, but you can increase the strength or the wire size of your hooks. So I like to put an Owner ST56. It's a 3X hook. Adds a little bit of weight onto the bottom of your bait so it keeps it from blowing out. So that's another little tip for you. Those little tungsten sticky tabs are awesome as well. But again, throwing a 6-inch glide bait or even bigger is an awesome way to catch a bunch of fish and put yourself in the make it more to target the bigger fish, make it more accessible to trigger those big fish into eating. All right, next up, I'm just going to talk about this one right now because the other ones I'm going to talk about a little bit longer. Some kind of underspin. You guys know I just did that underspin video, adding a little bit of flash, whether it's an exposed hook like this guy right here or a Texas rig weedless flashy swimmer. You know, having some kind of underspin, some kind of flash and vibration, something I can fish around, again, those key pieces of cover, and then just chuck and wind, just covering water. So whether it is a brush pile or if it is a secondary point that I just want to pick apart, I can cast that thing a long ways. I can cover a lot of water quickly and find out if those fish are there. Now, depending on if I'm fishing around grass that's now coming up with the water temps rising, or I'm fishing around brush piles, I might go with a weedless version and go with a flashy swimmer. But that's my 1-2 punch there. Let's talk about this one, and then we'll talk about the last 3 for power fishing. So all winter long, I've been throwing a Megabass, a 110 Junior +1, or the 110 +1. This guy right here, this is the Shimano. Hold this up right here. Zumverno 95. Okay, so that's it's a 95 size jerk bait. You see that flash boost in there? This is a bait that I can fish more aggressively. So the 110, the Megabass, the 110 is the king of finesse jerk baits. Very detailed. Has a great suspend. It works extremely well in colder water. Now, as the water warms, I go with more of an aggressive jerk bait, and that Zumverno has a lot of flash to it, a lot more side-to-side action, and that thing catches a ton of fish for me, especially when you get around those active fish. Now, the next 3 I'm going to talk about kind of together because it's kind of a process. Now, I have been side by side fishing different fisheries around the country, whether it's with buddies, Matt and I, whatever, and it seems like one day they'll eat one better than the other and vice versa. So typically, let's go with the chatterbait. Typically, I start off with a chatterbait, okay? Now, whether that's a bluegill pattern or a bait fish pattern or, you know, that spring red thing that we talk about so much, that spring red, how crazy and how good it can be in the springtime. But a 1/2 ounce chatterbait is something that I can chuck a long ways. And again, we're talking about covering water. So it's something that I can chuck a long ways and fish fairly fast, extremely fast. And I can just see, are there fish here, or am I ahead of that process, or am I behind the process? Or heck, maybe I just landed on the mother lode and now I'm just sticking big one after big one. But a chatterbait, it's fairly weedless, okay? Catches big ones, but a 1/2 ounce chatterbait, I like the 1/2 ounce because I can throw it a long ways. I can fish it fast. I can fish it around and through that cover, and I can just kind of put those puzzle pieces together quicker, okay? But that is a must for me. There are days, literally had a day specifically, I can remember last year, that Matt and I were fishing side by side. He was throwing that, I was throwing this guy right here. He was getting a lot more bites, but he wasn't sticking the fish. They were like short striking, right? That chatterbait moves fairly quickly. We talked about fishing it quickly. Now the benefit of the square bill, specifically this ATV right here, I could burn, pause, and then those fish would come up and just choke it. They just came up and just started engulfing that guy right there. It deflects really well. You can fish it shallow, you can fish it fast, but you have the option of burn, pause, and suspending this thing right in that fish's face. And they don't short strike this very often. They get it, they choke it, they eat it. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. I always have both of them tied on together. But again, I'm covering water with that chatterbait. And then if I'm getting short struck or I'm not getting bit, I might switch over to that square bill and see if I can trigger those fish into their predatory instinct of just chasing and then pausing and then just having to eat. And that's what's great about that square bill. And then last but not least, this guy right here. Some kind of lipless crankbait. Lipless crankbait, a trap, whatever you want to call it. This is the, I got let me unwind this so I can hold it to you guys. The paint just beating off of this thing. But that is the Jackal TN70. Just caught a ton of fish on this guy. This is a heavier bait. It's a 5/8 ounce, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But it's something that I can fish fairly fast. Now, again, when I'm fishing the lipless, I can bomb this thing, but I'm letting it fall. I'm hopping it. I'm not doing the just burn like you would a trap and rip it through grass like we do a little bit later in the year. But that guy right there, or a lipless crankbait out on the West Coast, and an LV 500 has caught so many double-digit fish for Matt and I through the years. It is just a confidence bait. And then out here, that TN70 is lights out. So I'm hopping it, right? Now I might go with a 1/2 ounce actual rattle trap where I'm chucking and just winding, right? Just wind. I'm just covering water because you can catch fish that way too. But that's kind of my 1, 2, 3 punch. The lipless, the square bill, and then the chatterbait, depending on how quick I'm fishing, depending on what I'm fishing, and depending on the types of bites I'm getting or not getting, if that makes sense. Okay, now last but not least, got 3 more rods here that I have tied on. These are my finesse baits. So I talked about earlier in this video, those key pieces of cover or structure, however you want to look at it. You know, whether it's a rock pile, whether it's a lay down providing cover, or a dock, or you know, a brush pile, whatever it is, those fish are going to use that as their transition points. So I typically have 2 finesse baits that I can work fairly quick. Again, it's all about fishing efficiently, quickly, but efficiently, right? So my number 1 finesse bait is going to be a compact flipping jig. That's that Canterbury compact flipping jig. This thing is a smaller profile, has a real stout hook on it, but it's something I can flip and pitch and pick apart an area really effectively. You know, as these fish move into these backwaters, whether it's a creek channel to get back to this bay or not, you know, there might be a stump, a laydown, a stump, a branch, a stump, a laydown. I want something that I could boom, 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 you know, flip it in there, let it fall, hop, hop, check, reel it up. Next one. I'm working efficiently, but I'm working quickly. And that guy is extremely well this time of the year. Again, that compact profile. I have a trailer on there that has some action. And again, I'm just fishing quickly, and the big ones eat a jig. On the flip side, you guys know how much I love specifically a power shot. Okay, now the reason I call this a power shot, heavier line, 15 to 17 pound line. I have a owner that is the Cover Shot HD hook and a 6-inch magic worm. For those of you guys that know, that worm is poured by Robo Worm, one of the staples in the industry for soft plastic worms, especially 6-inch worms. But that magic worm has some of the Robo Worm colors, and I've caught a ton of big fish. Again, power shot, heavy hook, you're not gonna bend that thing out, heavy line, and you're able to make little roll hand casts, backhand flips and pitches to those areas that you maybe targeted with that glide bait or targeted with the jerk bait, but now you wanna slow down just a little bit and suspend something in their face. That guy right there, see if I can hold this so you guys can see it all right. No, not gonna work. Let's see. Try to get this line. There you go. Right, that guy right there, being able to suspend that thing in their face when they bite it, you can jack them hard with that Cover Shot HD hook. You're not going to bend it out. And then last but not least, this is really my lineup. These are the rods I have tied on. I talked about, I might have referenced it in that last video. I can't remember or not, but there's several times in the early spring where I've come across those key pieces of cover, whether it's a dock or a lay down or whatever, and there is a whole school of giants suspended, right? There's just a whole school, wherever they are along that transition, for whatever reason, they're on that. They are staged there. And the Senko, specifically a Texas rigged Senko, something that I can skip, something that I can make little quick pitches and flips to, but having that real subtle fall. It's not overbearing. It's not too much for those big fish. Again, they don't want to eat. They're just sitting there sunning themselves. They're I can visibly see them, and they don't want to eat. But when you stay back far from them, you skip a Senko up there, you let it fall all the way to bottom, let it sit there, sometimes up to a minute or two, and then whether it's a little hop or just a little shake, you'll feel that doop, and now you're on for a ride, right? You have that big giant on up underneath that dock. But a Senko is my last finesse bait that I have tied on, because I've been in so many different fisheries throughout the country where you can visibly see a fish that you can't throw something to without really spooking them, without making a big splash, or just something that's too overbearing, where that Senko, again, Texas rigged, I'm not wacky rigged, I don't want to get hung up, but that thing right there has caught me a ton of big fish in the spring. Now, with that said, you guys notice the pinks on my worms. I can't tell you how many times, for whatever reason, in the springtime, pink seems to be the deal. So at least for my soft plastics. But guys, springtime, where do they go? Now you kind of figure out where those fish are along that transition. We know where they have to go to spawn. It's just figuring out where those fish are along that process, along that transition process. And once you do, stick with them, because they're going to move every day, right? We found the baits. We talked about the baits to find them. Now is the time to get out and have some of the best days of the entire year. Soak up those rays. Make sure you wear good sunglasses, right? It's so important to be able to see those fish, see those key pieces of structure, and then if you are bed fishing, right, you want some polarized sunglasses to be able to see those big females up there doing their thing. But guys, as always, we appreciate the support. I'll link all the stuff down below in the video description, favorite colors, favorite baits, all that good stuff. But yeah, get out on the water. It's a great time to be out on the water and catch a ton of fish. Those are my confidence baits. If If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. We'll try to get those as soon as possible. But as always, thanks for watching. Hit that like button if you learned something from this video, and hit that subscribe button. Click that bell, turn on those notifications. We do 6 videos a week for you guys, simply to help you guys catch more and bigger bass. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you guys on the next video.